I watched my father's face drain of color as grandfather stepped out of the Rolls-Royce, his cold eyes scanning the graduation crowd until they found mine. "Tyler," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "it's time your family learned what happens when they throw away a Bennett." My stepsister Madison clutched her Tesla keys tighter, the same keys that had once represented my stolen future, as three more luxury cars pulled up behind us. I was 18 years old, staring at 4 college acceptance letters spread across my desk like a cruel joke. My name is Tyler Bennett, and I should have been celebrating. Harvard, Stanford, MIT, Columbia. Every envelope represented years of perfect grades, volunteer work, and sleepless nights. Instead, I felt sick to my stomach. The college fund was gone. $60,000 vanished overnight. Well, not exactly vanished. I knew exactly where it went. It was sitting in the driveway, gleaming red under the afternoon sun. Madison's brand new Tesla Model S, complete with custom leather seats and that stupid vanity plate she'd picked out. Princess. My stepsister got a car worth more than my entire future. The betrayal hit deeper than just the money. Dad and Janet had planned this behind my back for months. While I stressed over SAT scores and scholarship applications, they were at the Tesla dealership, signing papers with funds that had my name on them since I was 10 years old. Mom, my real mom, had started that college account before she died. Every birthday, every Christmas, she'd add money and tell me about the amazing things I'd learn in college. Now, Janet's daughter got to cruise around town in my education. The family meeting that afternoon went about as well as you'd expect. Dad sat there, avoiding eye contact, while Janet did most of the talking. Her voice had that fake sweet tone she used when she was about to destroy someone's life with a smile. "Tyler, sweetheart, you're being dramatic," she said, checking her manicured nails. Madison needed reliable transportation for her senior year. Besides, you're smart enough to get student loans. Smart enough for debt, apparently. Not smart enough to matter. Dad finally spoke up, and his words cut deeper than Janet's dismissive tone. "Son, Madison's our priority right now. She's got her whole future ahead of her, and we want to make sure she has every advantage." Every advantage. Like I wasn't his son, too. The conversation revealed 4 years of resentment I'd tried to ignore. Since Dad married Janet when I was 14, I'd watched myself become invisible in my own home. Madison got the bigger bedroom, the family vacations planned around her interests, the constant praise for mediocre grades while my achievements barely got acknowledged. I'd convinced myself it was temporary adjustment stuff, that things would balance out eventually. They never did. I just got better at being ignored. That night, alone in my room with those useless acceptance letters, I made a decision that would change everything. I pulled out the old photo albums Mom had left me, searching for something I'd only heard about in whispered arguments between my parents. Grandfather, Harrison Bennett. Dad had cut ties with his own father over a decade ago, right around the time he met Janet. From the fragments I'd overheard, it involved money, pride, and Dad choosing his new family over the old one. Harrison Bennett was apparently some kind of successful businessman, but Dad refused to discuss him beyond angry mutters about controlling and impossible expectations. Looking at those old photos, I saw something interesting. Harrison had the same determined expression I recognized in my own mirror, the same stubborn jaw that Dad always said made me difficult. Maybe that wasn't such a bad thing after all. The phone number took 3 hours of internet searching to find. Harrison Bennett owned Bennett Construction and Development, with offices downtown and projects all over the state. His assistant was polite but firm. Mr. Bennett didn't take unsolicited calls. "Tell him Tyler Bennett wants to meet," I said. "Tell him his son stole my college fund to buy his stepdaughter a Tesla." 20 minutes later, Harrison called me back personally. His voice was gravelly but sharp, like someone used to making million-dollar decisions before breakfast. "Well," he said after I explained everything, Sounds like my son hasn't changed much. The meeting was set for the next day. Something told me that conversation would reveal just how much my grandfather had been watching from the sidelines. Harrison's estate made my father's house look like a garage sale display. The driveway alone was longer than our entire street, winding through perfectly manicured gardens that probably cost more to maintain than most people's annual salary. When the front door opened, I expected a butler or some fancy servant. Instead, Harrison Bennett himself stood there, studying me like I was a business proposal he wasn't sure about yet. "You look like your grandmother," he said. Not hello, not nice to meet you, just that observation, delivered with the kind of authority that made you believe everything he said was fact. The lies to my family came surprisingly easy. I told Dad and Janet I was taking a gap year to find myself through honest construction work. Dad actually looked relieved. Janet practically beamed. Finally, Tyler was lowering his expectations to match their opinion of him. They were so happy to have their guilt disappear, they didn't ask a single follow-up question. Living with Harrison felt like attending the world's most expensive boot camp. He woke me up at 5:30 every morning, not with gentle conversation, but with the sound of his dress shoes clicking across the marble floor. Coffee was already made, newspapers laid out, and my work clothes pressed and waiting. The old man didn't believe in easing into anything. "Construction starts early," he'd say, handing me steel-toed boots that cost more than Madison's monthly allowance. "If you're going to learn my business, you learn it from the ground up." Literally. The job sites were brutal. Real construction, not some fake make-work project designed to teach me character. I spent 10-hour days hauling materials, mixing concrete, and getting screamed at by foremen who didn't care that my last name was on the company checks. My hands developed calluses within the first week. My back ached constantly. I'd never been happier in my life. Well, let me clarify that. The happiness came later, during the evenings. Harrison would be waiting when I got home, usually in his study with blueprints spread across his massive desk. While I showered off the day's dirt, he'd prepare dinner himself. Turns out the old man was an incredible cook. Another surprise in a growing list. Then, we'd eat and talk business until midnight. "Your father," Harrison said one evening, cutting into a perfectly prepared steak, "thought construction was beneath him. Wanted to start at the executive level. Skipped the learning phase entirely." I kept eating, letting him talk. I'd learned that Harrison shared information when he was ready, not when you asked for it. He'd show up to job sites in expensive suits, trying to give orders to men who'd forgotten more about building than he'd ever learn. Made a fool of himself and me in the process. The real education happened during those dinner conversations. Harrison didn't just teach me about real estate development. He taught me about people. How to read what someone really wanted versus what they claimed to want. How to negotiate from strength, even when you had nothing. How to build loyalty instead of demanding respect. "Business is simple," he'd say, pouring himself exactly one glass of wine. "Find out what people need, figure out how to provide it better than anyone else, and never let them forget they came to you first." The best part: my family had no idea what was happening. They thought I was struggling in some cramped apartment, barely scraping by with manual labor wages. Dad would occasionally ask how I was doing, but his tone suggested he expected me to come crawling back any day, ready to accept whatever scraps they offered. Meanwhile, I was learning to read financial statements and zoning regulations. Harrison introduced me to city council members, bank presidents, and contractors who'd been working with Bennett Construction for decades. These weren't courtesy meetings either. Harrison made it clear I was being groomed as his successor. The boy's got potential, he'd tell his business partners right in front of me. Something his father never had. 3 months in, Harrison showed me the legal documents. My name was being added to everything: bank accounts, property deeds, business licenses. The trust fund alone was worth $2 million, with more assets being transferred every week. I was 18 years old, officially broke according to my family, and secretly building an empire. The construction workers started treating me differently too, though not because they knew about my inheritance. I'd earned their respect the hard way, by showing up every day and doing the work without complaining. They taught me tricks you can't learn in business school: how to spot structural problems before they become disasters, how to manage subcontractors who'd rather argue than work, how to solve problems with limited budgets and impossible deadlines. "Kid's got good instincts," I heard one foreman tell Harrison during a site visit. "Doesn't try to reinvent everything, just makes smart improvements." Harrison smiled when he thought I wasn't looking. Turns out, having me earn respect from his crews was part of the test. He'd seen too many entitled rich kids destroy family businesses by thinking money was a substitute for competence. The hardest part was watching my family from a distance. Madison's social media posts showed constant shopping trips, expensive dinners, and weekend getaways funded by what should have been my education. Dad and Janet looked happier than I'd seen them in years, probably because they'd eliminated their biggest source of guilt. They sent me occasional care packages filled with generic items from discount stores, like they were helping some distant relative they barely remembered. The cards always had the same message: "Hope you're learning valuable lessons about responsibility." I was learning lessons, all right, just not the ones they expected. Harrison had been planning this revelation for months, maybe years. He'd watched his son's character deteriorate from afar, waiting for the right moment to act. My phone call hadn't surprised him. He'd been expecting it eventually. "Family dynamics reveal themselves over time," he explained one evening while reviewing blueprints for a new shopping center. "Your father chose immediate gratification over long-term relationships. Now, he gets to live with that choice." Madison's graduation was approaching fast. Harrison had already arranged for the Rolls-Royce to be detailed, ordered custom suits for both of us, and prepared legal documents that would transfer control of his empire to me officially. The plan was elegant in its simplicity: maximum impact with perfect timing. But first, we had one final business meeting to attend. Harrison wanted me to meet his lawyer and accountant, to sign the papers that would make everything official. After that, there would be no turning back. The next morning would change everything, but sitting in that study with my grandfather, learning the business that would soon be mine, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Dad remarried. I felt like I belonged somewhere. The graduation ceremony was everything you'd expect from a private school event. Perfectly manicured, lawn, white folding chairs arranged in geometric precision, and parents competing to see who could display their wealth most subtly. Dad wore his best suit, the one he'd bought for his wedding to Janet. Madison sat with her graduating class, that Tesla keychain dangling from her purse like a trophy. They had no idea what was coming. Harrison and I had spent the morning reviewing our strategy one final time. The documents were signed, the transfers complete, and 3 additional cars filled with Harrison's business associates were already positioned around the school perimeter. My grandfather didn't believe in half measures. "Remember," he'd said while adjusting his platinum cufflinks, "this isn't about revenge. It's about consequences." The difference mattered to him, though I wasn't entirely sure I saw it the same way. I watched from across the parking lot as my family gathered near Dad's aging BMW. Janet was taking selfies with Madison, probably planning to flood social media with proud stepmother posts. Dad checked his phone constantly, the way he always did when he felt out of place around wealth he couldn't match. Then, our convoy arrived. The Rolls-Royce came first, silent as a whisper, but impossible to ignore. Harrison had chosen the silver one specifically, understated elegance that whispered money instead of shouting it. Behind us, 3 more luxury vehicles followed in perfect formation: Mercedes, Bentley, Aston Martin, each one worth more than my father's annual salary. The entire graduation crowd turned to watch. Parents stopped their conversations mid-sentence. Students pulled out phones to record whatever was about to happen. Dad's mouth fell open when I stepped out of the Rolls-Royce. The custom suit Harrison had ordered fit like it was painted on. Italian leather shoes, Swiss watch, everything coordinated perfectly. But the real shock came when Harrison emerged from the driver's side. My grandfather moved like he owned everything in sight, which, considering his real estate portfolio, might not have been entirely wrong. "Tyler," he said, his voice carrying across the parking lot like he was addressing a board meeting. "It's time your family learned what happens when they throw away a Bennett." Madison's Tesla keys slipped from her fingers. That little detail still makes me smile. The confrontation that followed was everything Harrison had orchestrated and more. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make dramatic gestures. He simply stated facts in the same tone he used to discuss quarterly earnings. "My grandson," he announced to the gathering crowd, "has been living with me for the past 6 months, working construction during the day, learning business management in the evenings. As of this morning, he owns Bennett Construction and Development outright." Dad started stammering something about family loyalty and misunderstandings. Harrison cut him off with a look that could have frozen the sun. "You stole $60,000 from your son's future to buy your stepdaughter a car. That's not a misunderstanding. That's theft." The trust fund revelation hit next. $2 million, plus controlling interest in a construction empire worth 20 times that amount. Dad's legs actually gave out. He grabbed Janet's arm for support, but she was too busy calculating what this meant for their own financial future to help him. Madison recovered first, probably because she was 18, and still believed everything would work out somehow. Her first words, "Tyler, we should talk about this privately." Smart girl. Unfortunately for her, I'd learned negotiation tactics from the best. "Madison," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "you're welcome to apply for an entry-level position at Bennett Construction. We're always looking for reliable people who want to earn their way up." The crowd murmured appreciation. Nothing people love more than watching privilege get a reality check. Harrison placed his hand on my shoulder, the gesture both protective and proud. Dad made one last, desperate attempt to salvage the situation, talking about second chances and family forgiveness. But some bridges burn completely. This was one of them. The aftermath would take months to fully play out. But standing there in that parking lot, I felt something settle into place. Justice, maybe. Or just the satisfaction of seeing consequences finally catch up with choices. Either way, business school was going to be interesting. The months that followed taught me something Harrison had been trying to show me all along. Real power isn't about humiliating people who wronged you. It's about building something better and watching them realize what they lost. Dad called 17 times in the first week. I answered exactly once. He started with apologies, moved to justifications, then ended with threats about family obligations. I hung up when he suggested I owed him something for raising me. Turns out, stealing your kid's future cancels out the dad card pretty quickly. Madison surprised me, though. She actually showed up at the construction office 3 weeks later, wearing jeans instead of designer clothes for the first time I could remember. No Tesla this time. She'd taken the bus. "I want that job you mentioned," she said. Harrison watched from his office window while I handled the conversation. This was my test, not his. "Entry level means entry level," I told her. "Same hours as everyone else, same rules. No special treatment because we're family." She nodded. I figured. "Why?" I asked. "Because I've been thinking about what grandfather said, about throwing away a Bennett." She looked around the office, taking in the blueprints and project photos. "I think I was the one who got thrown away. I just didn't realize it until now." Smart girl. Maybe there was hope for her after all. Janet filed for divorce 6 months later. Apparently, being married to someone whose son controlled a multi-million-dollar empire was only appealing when she thought she could benefit from it. Dad got to keep the house and half their savings. The Tesla got repossessed when Madison couldn't make payments on her part-time retail salary. The real satisfaction came during my first board meeting as company president. Harrison sat beside me, officially retired but obviously still running things behind the scenes. We were reviewing bids for a new downtown development when someone mentioned the competition. Bennett and Sons Construction is bidding against us, our project manager said. Richard Bennett's new company. Dad had started his own construction business using his divorce settlement. Bennett and Sons. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in that room. What's their bid? I asked. $2 million over ours. Their reputation isn't established enough to justify the premium. Harrison smiled slightly. Business is business. May the best Bennett win. 6 months later, Dad's company was bankrupt. Turns out, reputation matters more than shared DNA in the construction world. Harrison had spent decades building relationships Dad couldn't replicate with anger and entitlement. But the real victory. Madison earned her promotion to site supervisor last month. She's good at the work, respected by the crews, and finally understands what earning something actually means. Sometimes the best revenge is just becoming someone worth respecting.